Okay, so, all right.
Welcome everyone. Before we get started, we just wanted to start off with a land acknowledgement. We recognize that the land under our feet has long been home to Indigenous people, many of whom have been forced to migrate to other lands. I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe people. Tekaronto is covered by the Treaty 13 signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit and the William Treaties signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. We are settlers on this land that has been stolen from First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We must acknowledge and reflect on the history of our country and how it was built on the bones of Indigenous people who cared for this land. We should acknowledge that reconciliation is an action, and to be effective is an uncomfortable process. That includes a commitment to decentering settler voices and centering Indigenous voices, and most critically to making material concessions that change how we organize our institutions. Thank you everyone for joining us for our Dismantling Diet Culture event. I'm going to let Jacqueline take it away, who's sharing her screen right now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dismantling Diet Culture. It's a collaboration event with U of T's Cafe and York Women Mental Health Talks. So yay, this is our second time doing this. And we have once again invited lovely Natalie Rose and Miss Laura Arsenal. And we also invited another guest, Olivia Cupido, who's a first-time speaker. So exciting. So to once again introduce our speakers, our first speaker is Natalie Rose Allen, who is a Toronto-based registered psychotherapist who specializes in treating eating disorders and body image issues. She works primarily with adolescents and adults. Natalie also provides intuitive eating and emotion coaching to people worldwide. Before specializing in food-related disorders, Natalie provides psychotherapy and assessment services to survivors of motor vehicle accidents and other forms of trauma. She is passionate about helping people build healthier relationships with their emotions and with their bodies. In her spare time, you can find Natalie spending time with loved ones or taking photos of food, sunsets, and flowers. Our second speaker will be Olivia Cupido, who is an anti-diet and HAES informed registered dietitian and cook in Toronto. She works with clients to foster healthier relationships with food, whether they're navigating chronic health conditions, juggling gut health triggers, or recovering from disordered eating. The ultimate goal to bring pleasure and enjoyment back into the kitchen without guilt, shame, or rules. After growing up in the kitchen, it remains her favorite place to be, and this has greatly shaped her views on food and eating. Eating is about more than just the food itself. It's about connection, culture, enjoyment, and self-care. And our final speaker is Laura Jane Arsenal, who received her honors in psychology degree at York University, where she also served as president of Women Mental Health Talks. Today, she is a Francophone case manager with Loft Community Service as a part of government initiative to bring French services to Toronto's Francophone residents. Since 2017, Laura has offered bilingual support to hundreds of people through support groups, seminars, case management, and events. Her passion has stemmed from her own experiences with anorexia nervosa, bipolar disorder, ADHD, generalized anxiety disorder, and chronic pain. Laura's healing framework is rooted within person-centered therapy and therapeutic presence, while acknowledging the intergenerational, colonial, and systemic impacts on health. So thank you so much for our speakers. And our first speaker of the day, once again, is Miss Natalie Rose. So if you would like to share your screen.
Okay, hello everyone. I am happy to be back here this year presenting for the Dismantling Diet Culture presentation. I'm a registered psychotherapist specializing in eating disorders and body image. So today I'm going to be talking about how diet culture plays a role in the development and maintenance of disordered eating and eating disorders. So we're going to talk about how to understand what diet culture is and how to spot it, how diet culture can be harmful, what are eating disorders and disordered eating, what are the links between diet culture and disordered eating, and how you can protect your mental health and your relationship with food. So diet culture is a system of beliefs and social behavior that values body weight and appearance more than health and well-being. It worships thinness and equates thinness to health and moral virtue. It encourages us to spend a massive amount of time, energy, effort, and money trying to change our body. It demonizes certain foods and ways of eating while glorifying other foods that are deemed healthier. So a few factors that comprise diet culture are restrictive diets, unrealistic food and body ideals, rules, numbers, and formulas, weight loss apps and programs, and wellness products and supplements. So a restrictive diet could be any diet that really restricts calorie intake to a low amount. So 1200 seems to be one that's promoted often. You'll often see this in calorie counting apps. It'll just round this number for you based on whatever information you put in, and people seem to think that this is the calorie count that helps you lose weight. So we actually know now that this is the nutritional intake of, or the calorie intake of, a 2-year-old or a toddler. It's not healthy, and yet we're made to believe that this is what is acceptable or should be followed. Restricted diets can involve low-calorie food products. They may exclude major food groups. So there's sugar-free diets, carb-free diets, fat-free diets, which are food groups that we need. Any diet that lacks nutritional balance or promotes rapid, painless weight loss, or is based on some scientific breakthrough. Diet culture can also include wellness products and supplements, so anything offering impossible or unsustainable results. So skinny teas and detox cleanses, those are technically sort of laxatives dressed up in a fancy box. Weight loss surgeries, diet pills, appetite suppressants, cellulite removal creams, and waist trainers. Rules, numbers, and formulas, so being told to refrain from eating before and after specific times, being told to stick within a certain calorie count each day, being told that certain foods should never be eaten. Other signs of diet culture involve unrealistic food and body ideals. So the media often promotes unrealistic body types, whether it's the thin model body type that, only 2% of the whole population really has that body type, or you see a lot of bodies being photoshopped, whether it's pictures or videos. We know that filters can often look really, really real. And whether or not you realize that it is a filter, being exposed to these body ideals all the time can impact your relationship with your own body. Foods are often seen as good or bad, or labeled sin-free or guilt-free. Certain ingredients can be deemed toxic, dangerous, or unclean. The notion of having to earn food or rest through exercise is often one that we hear through diet culture. We see a lot of body transformations, so progress photos, or being encouraged to lose weight after COVID, gaining weight through COVID, or after pregnancy or whatever. And extreme fitness and exercise standards and pressures. So often these are not aligned with most of our lifestyles. There are also a lot of weight loss apps and programs, so apps that are encouraging you to count all your macronutrients and calories, weight loss programs that focus only on body weight, inches lost, and calories burned. So these are really diet-focused programs, not necessarily health-focused programs. So some influences in diet culture can show up anywhere. It could be the friend lamenting over how many calories they've just eaten, like, oh my God, I can't believe I just ate all that. It could be a coworker sharing their excitement about a new diet, like talking about doing keto, hearing negative comments made about your or another person's weight or food choices. So someone might be asking you, are you going to eat all that, or tell you that's bad for you, or they might be saying that about someone else. Being complimented for weight loss. So you look great. Did you lose weight? This reinforces the thin ideal, regardless of whether you might have lost weight in a healthy or an unhealthy way. Grocery stores, you'll often see them selling products that promote diets like labeled keto friendly or low carb or sugar free or guilt free. So when we see these labels, we tend to associate them with health, like that something might be healthier because it's keto friendly, because diet culture has sort of co-opted the keto diet as something to lose weight or to be healthy. Celebrities in the media are often scrutinized for changes in their appearance. So, we'll be the first to hear about Adele's weight loss, and these things are shown as really important things to talk about and to discuss. So diet culture creates a link between your eating and exercise habits and your moral character. So diet culture, it dictates what types of bodies are acceptable in society. The reason why we'll hear a lot about a celebrity's weight loss is because that's promoted as being great. Like, she looks so much better now, she's healthier now, we should all be losing weight, regardless of whether that weight loss was done in a healthy way. And unhealthy levels of thinness are glorified all the time and rewarded as proof of hard work, regardless of how weight loss is achieved. While fatness is punished and equated to laziness and lack of self-control. And this disdain for fat bodies becomes systemic under diet culture, because anyone who isn't thin or doesn't fit that thin ideal is automatically viewed as unhealthy and shamed into silence. So actual determinants of health are income and social status, employment and working conditions, education and literacy, childhood experiences, physical environments, social supports and coping skills, healthy behaviors like regular exercise, hydration, sleep, access to health services, and gender, culture, race, and racism. And one of the things that most of these factors have in common are stress levels and trauma. So we know that stress is the catalyst for most health conditions. These are highly correlated with conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer. So diet culture makes it seem like you can control your health through diet and exercise, whereas the research shows that these are more realistic determinants of health, and these are correlated with higher risks of health diseases. But the reason why it's such a huge industry is because it makes a lot of money by profiting off of our insecurities. So by creating these products and telling us that if we lose weight, we'll be healthier, or if we buy this diet program, we'll be healthier, they profit. And especially because diets are short-lived, you tend to lose weight really quickly, and then there's a 95% chance of regaining all that weight and then starting the diet over again. So it kind of hooks us in and profits off of the insecurities that it creates, that it helps create. So some of the reasons why diet culture is harmful is that it doesn't teach us how to respect our body, or how to develop a healthy relationship with food, or how to feel our best. It takes the joy out of eating and turns it into a stressful experience. It oppresses people who don't match diet culture's picture of health. So for example, people in larger bodies, people of color, people with disabilities. Diet culture is also harmful because it promotes thinking patterns and behaviors that mimic disordered eating and eating disorder symptoms. It contributes to disordered eating and eating disorders, and it affects people of every age, gender, ethnicity, race, class, culture, and geographical location. So research has shown that 35% of dieters progress to disordered eating, and 20 to 25% of those develop full-blown eating disorders. So what are eating disorders? They are serious psychological or psychiatric illnesses. They usually start in childhood or adolescence and youth. They involve high levels of psychological distress, risks of long-term mental illness, medical complications, and increased risk of premature death. There's a high risk of recurrence, and they don't usually resolve on their own. If untreated, they can negatively impact health and quality of life for a person's entire lifespan. So I won't be able to talk about all the eating disorders, but the eating disorders that are affected mostly by diet culture or involve an element of body image distress are anorexia, bulimia, binge eating, other specified feeding and eating disorder, and orthorexia. So body image issues can exist on a spectrum, just as disordered eating and eating disorders do. So on the far left, you'll see body dissatisfaction. Body dissatisfaction is common. So this could involve disliking your appearance or parts of your appearance. It's often associated with dieting. So someone may start dieting if they're dissatisfied with their body. Body dissatisfaction is attributable to a discrepancy between the perception of what your body image is and your ideal body image, what you'd like your body to look like. So body dysmorphia is more of having a distorted body image. So your perception of your body is much different than from what other people see, and it's usually negative. On the far right end of the spectrum, there's body dysmorphic disorder, which is an OCD related disorder. So it involves a lot of obsessions and compulsive behaviors related to body image, negative body image. So I'll just breeze through these really quickly. Anorexia involves a severely low restriction of energy intake or below the requirements for one's body, an intense fear of gaining weight or body fat, and persistent behaviors to avoid weight gain, along with a disturbed body image and over-evaluation of body weight on self-worth. Bulimia often involves recurrent episodes of binge eating followed by purging behaviors to prevent weight gain. Self-esteem is usually highly influenced by body shape and weight. So binge eating involves eating excessively large amounts of food within a very short period of time with a sense of lacking control over what one's eating. And purging can include vomiting, or it can be laxatives, diuretics, fasting, or over-exercising. So binge eating disorder is the recurrent episodes of binge eating without any compensatory behaviors or purging. Binge eating is often triggered by a period or multiple periods of restriction, so food restriction or dieting. OSFED is a name given to eating disorder symptoms that aren't necessarily classified as one of the other eating disorders. So often people with anorexia may not be diagnosed unless they're at a severely low body weight. So we know now that you can have anorexia even if you don't have a very low body weight. And orthorexia is one that is sort of newer in recent years, and it's something that involves an unhealthy obsession with eating only healthy or clean foods, paired with a rigid avoidance of foods that are deemed unhealthy. So there's this cultural belief these days that what you put into your body determines your quality of life. And that's led to this fixation on righteous eating or clean eating. So here's sort of a view of the spectrum of disordered eating. So someone with normal eating patterns might have a neutral view of food. All foods fit. So they might really enjoy healthful, nutrient-dense foods, and then also be able to, say, go to a restaurant with a friend and eat less nutrient-dense foods. Both kinds of foods exist in their life without significant distress or preoccupation with what they're eating. Disordered eating can involve a lot of things that seem normalized to us. Okay, so yo-yo dieting, crash diets, clean eating, using a plant-based diet for the purpose of weight loss, juice cleanse diets, fasting, aside from religious reasons, restriction, binge eating, body image issues, overexercising. And then, of course, the eating disorders are what we just went into. So how diets can resemble disordered eating. Diet cultures can promote weigh-ins and weight loss. And this can kind of mimic the obsessive weighing behaviors that are common in eating disorders, such as weighing every day or multiple times a day. Calorie-focused recipes and meal plans can often contribute to obsessive calorie counting. Transformation photos sort of mimic body checking behaviors that you see in eating disorders. So often someone with an eating disorder will take pictures of their body and compare them to previous times just to notice changes. And this can create a lot of distress for them. Fat shaming, must burn fat ideology can lead to a fear of weight gain, or sort of mimics the fear of weight gain in eating disorders. Some people say that cheat days are kind of like planned binges. So a cheat day is kind of like a way to justify binging on foods that you otherwise don't allow yourself to have when you're dieting. No rest days sort of sounds like compulsive exercise or not allowing yourself to rest, even though the body needs rest. And diet culture also promotes calorie and food restriction, and eating disorders often involve chronic restriction. So diets are kind of like smoking, because not everyone who goes on a diet develops an eating disorder. Just like you might smoke and never get lung cancer, but there are evidence-based short-term and long-term health consequences of both dieting and smoking that outweigh the benefits. So another part of how diets resemble disordered eating is black and white thinking. So this is when we don't look at the whole positive and negative qualities of food or body into a cohesive, realistic whole. So we're viewing foods as either all good or all bad, choosing only healthy foods or no unhealthy foods. Being on a rigid diet, otherwise feeling no control at all. Being thin and toned, or viewing yourself as unhealthy or unattractive. So realistically, there's no right or wrong way to eat. And eating patterns should be diverse, just as body types are diverse. So a few strategies or ways that you can protect your relationship with food. One way is to protect your relationship with your body as well. So modifying your social media intake to unfollow accounts that promote any kind of images that make you feel bad about your body, or accounts that promote diet culture or strict food rules. You want to follow intuitive eating and anti-diet accounts, and try to diversify your feed so that you have access or exposure to many different body types. Prioritizing self-care, so prioritizing sleep and balanced nutrition, journaling, meditation, setting boundaries, counseling, support groups, therapy. mindful eating. So it's good to eat regular meals and snacks every 3 to 4 hours, just to help regulate mood and appetite and energy levels. Avoid skipping meals or eliminating entire food groups. Try to diversify your food choices and also expand your interests. So staying social, making time for hobbies, and scheduling time offline. And of course, if you experience any kind of stress or feel like your relationship with food or your body is impacting your mood or your quality of life, don't hesitate to reach out for support. So there's a Netic helpline, or they have their website has a ton of information, support, and resources. Netic.ca is a website. There's the National Eating Disorder Association. Balancedtx.com has a lot of free resources and online support groups that you can join for free. There's Sheena's Place in Toronto, and the Recovery Record app is a really nice way to use if you're trying to move away from dieting or heal your relationship with food. And then lastly, I have this slide in from last year. I still have this online course, which if you use the discount code, it's free. And it just has a lot of coping tools and helps you develop self-awareness, and has reflection activities and self-esteem building and exercises to help you improve your relationship with food. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Sorry, me and Jacqueline kept turning on and off our mics. Thank you so much for that. We'll do a little Q&A session right now. Does anyone have any questions for Natalie? Feel free to either unmute, or if you want to write it in the chat, you can do so. So someone, Nolak, has written, in some cultures, publicly body shaming is socially acceptable, often by elders, and they do not understand how their comments may affect others. How would you help such individuals, or how would you suggest one to respond in such situation?
Yeah. This one is so tough because you can't change the other person's mind. So yeah, often by elders, even parents, will just sort of, that'll be the first thing that they say to you, is like they'll comment on your weight or your body or notice something like that. And it can be so triggering. So sometimes it's about setting boundaries by saying, hey, it really hurts my feelings when you make comments like that. And you might get a lot of pushback from them. Like they might sort of argue on that. But it might be just more helpful for you to set that boundary with yourself by speaking up and saying those comments are not okay. If they don't respond to the boundaries that you set, you might consider how much time you spend with those individuals. It might also be just about self-care. So when that happens, acknowledging to yourself like that you're triggered or that you are feeling hurt by what they said, and validating that for yourself, that that's hurtful and that that's not okay, and that it makes sense why you'd feel upset by being body shamed, or even by hearing their comments about other people. So it is really tough. And I would just say self-care, and, talk to someone when you're feeling hurt about what someone has said. But yeah, it's really tough to change their minds when they have that it's ingrained in their mind that it's okay, or that they think that they're helping with those comments.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Dia also wrote, is there a way to access slides for later?
Yeah, Yeah, we can send those slides out. I think we did that last year too, right?
Yes, I just want to make sure you're okay with
Yeah,
us
for
sending
sure.
your slides. Okay, awesome. So we'll send it out to all participants who are interested. Oh, everyone who's signed up, you can send it out through email. I do have a question for you. What kind of boundaries would you suggest people have when it comes to online relationships with food? So I know, like, by that I mean like things like TikTok. I've noticed a lot in terms of like the wellness industry and being that girl and what I eat in a day and stuff. And it can be hard because you never know what your algorithm is going to be. So, what kind of boundaries would you suggest people have in place to protect themselves?
Yeah, I think that you have to be kind of aggressive when it comes to setting boundaries like that. I find even myself clicking on like the not interested. And then even when I've done that, it'll a video like from the same person will still show up. So it's like I have to set it again. I think that the algorithm is really tough like that. So if you've liked or if you're following someone who promotes that message, you're more likely to be pushed information that's similar to that. So definitely really set that boundary with yourself and acknowledge how it makes you feel when you are looking at that type of comment, and even block accounts if it keeps coming up. Um, Following, I think if you actively search out anti-diet accounts or haze accounts, the more that you start engaging with that content, the more it'll start popping up on your algorithm. And yeah, I think setting time limits as well. Like, I don't know about you, but sometimes if I'm like not really paying attention, I'll be scrolling for a long period of time and then just realize that that's not helping me. So setting time limits on how long you're on a certain app like Instagram or TikTok, but definitely unfollowing accounts, blocking accounts. Oh, I saw someone write, oh, that was you writing about Abby's kitchen. Yeah, she's great. She's great.
Yeah, I find that like consuming that kind of media has helped me at least like get factual information rather than what's trending at the moment, because that will always change what science rarely does.
Definitely. And one more thing that I would add is sometimes looking at the person's credentials can help. Like sometimes anti-diet nutritionists or dietitians can have a lot of myth busting information. So um, following accounts like that versus influencers who are promoting messages that aren't really backed by any credible source.
For sure, yeah, and not taking things at face value, even though it seems like they're very sure about it. I
Yeah,
think that helped a lot because they'll usually buy into it right away if they seem sure.
totally.
Does anyone else have any questions for Natalie? If you want to unmute, you can. If you want to type in the chat. Oh, Julia.
Hi, thanks so much for doing this. I almost feel a bit like, I don't know, to some level, like I almost feel like I shouldn't be here because I almost feel like you have to already have made progress in this area before you can like come to this talk. I don't know why that's like a feeling I have, but it's bizarre for me because I had just downloaded my Fitness Pal like 2 days ago, and it's weird to be so, waist deep in one way of living and thinking and seeing things, and then to hear the other perspective. So I'm just wondering, like, to what degree do we have individual choice if we feel like we're in a culture and or system and or ecosphere where we can't escape this dimension of interpersonal perception? That's my question. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much, by the way. Really informative.
That's a really good question. And thank you for being here. Of course, you are completely welcome here. Everyone has autonomy over their own body. So even as a therapist working with clients who have severe eating disorders, it's always their choice of whether they want to or feel ready to follow recommendations or try out different ways of approaching food in their body. So you have full autonomy. And I think that it's just most important to meet yourself where you're at. You might be at a place where you're just open to hearing other perspectives, and that's it, and gathering information and seeing how it sits with you and how that information feels. And you should never feel pressured to buy into any one way of thinking at all.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Natalie. I see Dia has their hand up.
Hi. I just wanted to say that it feels like a really safe space, like to be here. It feels like this is something like I really connect with. Because like since grade 10, 11, I was really into fitness. At first, it started as like a thing that I really enjoyed. But as I kept going with it, I just felt like I need to work out so that I don't gain my weight. So it turned into like a toxic relationship with that. And like with all the information that I got today, it just feels like really safe. Like it feels like you have options, you have support, you can go to places if you need help with it. Like it definitely helps a lot.
That's amazing. I'm glad that you feel that way. Thank you for sharing and for being here.
Yeah, I second that. Thank you, Dia. If no one else has any questions, I think we're scheduled for a break right now. We'll take a 5-minute break and we'll be back at 7:52. Did the math, yay. Okay. We'll see everyone back 7:52. Perfect. We're going to move on to our second speaker, Olivia. Do you want to share your screen? Oh, I think you're muted.
Okay, so I just trying to figure out how to share my screen, but I also want to keep my other like document open.
Oh, you can do it side by side, or you can do like portion of your screen. We're going through
Yeah,
that
but I
now.
just don't want to. I want to be in like present mode and not in. Every time I hit present, it's full screen.
Mm-hmm. Are your notes
You know
in
what
the
I mean?
slideshow, like underneath the note section?
No, but it just like doesn't look nice.
Oh, I was gonna say if you click share screen
Mm-hmm.
and you see the top where it says basic and advanced,
Yeah.
click
Oh.
advanced and do portion of the screen so that you can focus it where your slides are gonna be, and then you can have your notes to the side.
Okay, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. So if I share, and now it's
there. You just have to adjust the. There you go. Perfect.
Oh my God, cool. Okay, thank you so much.
No worries.
Okay, so you guys can see this.
Yes.
You can see. Okay, great.
I can see your slides.
Oh,
but
I have
not
to
your
keep.
notes.
I have to keep that right there, though.
Yeah.
Okay. So this looks clear to everyone.
Yes.
Okay, so give me 1 second because I just need to like navigate this a bit better so that I can. Okay. Let me make this happen. Okay, sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Okay, so hello everyone. Thanks for coming back and for joining us today. I'm excited to get to join the whole crew. So my name is Olivia. I won't introduce myself as much as planned because you guys already took care of that, so thank you very much. But I will quickly kind of just do a quick note on what exactly it means, the whole anti-diet thing. I don't mean that in a sense of I am against people who choose to be on a diet. Again, based on our previous conversation, you have full autonomy to do what you would like with your own body and your own choices. What that means to me is more that in working together, I'm not going to put you on some type of diet for the purpose of weight loss, because I recognize that there's actually a lot more harms than benefits with that approach. So that's kind of what that means. In terms of what is Health at Every Size, what is HAES, it's a whole big system. I guess it's a movement. It's not necessarily a program, but it's actually now a very well researched, very well supported movement. So it's not just some like us who are against diet culture and mad. We have claims and we have support and backing here. And it's basically exactly as it sounds. It is the very, again, true and well supported belief that health does not look like a size. It can exist at any size in the same way that it can be absent at any size, right? And that exactly like Natalie had mentioned, like health looks a lot different than we may have originally thought or may have been taught, because it actually has way more to do with those social determinants of health than anything else, right? As much as obviously I believe in the power of food, I understand that, you know, education and how close to you are things like fresh foods and food outlets probably, and stress and work and all of that and finances probably weighs more on your health than your food choices do. Okay. So that's anyways, that's me. I'm especially happy to be part of this group today because I went to Ryerson, and so I'm kind of like the third party school here. But today, the goal and kind of why I'm here and why I was brought on is to talk more to the science side of things, and kind of where did they get it wrong? You know, where did diet culture get it wrong with a lot of these beliefs and things we're told, and all those sorts of things. So that's kind of my role today. I'm going to skip over a quick chat about diet culture again, because we just talked about what that was. And again, Natalie gave a really good explanation of that. So we'll skip right ahead to a few common diet culture beliefs and why I think they're wrong, basically. And again, some science to back me up. So I have 4 of them I want to go over. I realize one of them is moving here, but that's okay. If there's any questions throughout, please pop them in the chat, because there's so many things up on my screen right now. I can't actually see them, but I will get to them at the end. I also do just kind of want to put it out there and be really transparent. I am obviously someone who kind of does benefit and have privilege from diet culture's belief of things just because of the shape of my body, right? I realize I'm not exactly perhaps the person to dismantle diet culture alone, being someone who's in a privilege, in a thin white woman body who diet culture likes that. And so I realize that that just means that there's things that I don't know and experiences that I haven't had that differ from a lot of people that are, struggling with this. And accepting my body and all of that was challenging work, as it was for a lot of people, but it didn't take necessarily like bravery to stand up on that in a broader sense, because again, just because of the way society views things. Okay. So even though this is something that I work on with a lot of my clients, and accepting all bodies and what that looks like for different people, I just recognize that's a limitation. And I'm always happy to connect people to appropriate resources or professionals or things, or others if they feel that would be important for their journey through all this. And I'm happy to talk more about that if you like. Okay. So again, as I mentioned, we're going to skip this. But I did want to make a quick note about the different ways in which diet culture sees food and someone like myself sees food. And I think there's, again, especially, and I know there's people in the group today who are at really various levels of where they stand in all of this and how they feel and all of that, and personal work and growth that they've done, which I think is really great. And so I think it's good to think about, which of these sorts of phrases, when you go over like these and my side, resonates. And I think it's normal and it's okay for some of these phrases that are up here now to feel like truth to us, right? Again, because these are things we've heard a lot and probably really ingrained. So this idea that food exists as something to control, as something that can only be pleasurable if it's also like having a cheat day, right? Like Natalie said, or oops, being bad about it, or something that exists to basically get us to some end goal of changing our body weight, shape, or size. Food is something that we manipulate so that, yeah, we're, cooking this delicious thing, but at the end of the day, it's actually like everything is replaced and nothing is fun. And a big one is this idea that emotions and food should actually be really separate. That's probably a number one thing that I think diet culture definitely got wrong. So how do I see things? Slightly different. I think that, yes, it is often tied up with this idea of control, and especially when we're kind of firmly in that place, but it doesn't have to be, right? We do get to choose. I think that it exists, of course, for nourishment and all of that, but also for pleasure. And I think, especially today when there's so much like displeasure in this world, the simple pleasure that we can take in eating that we get to do every day is such something that we should take advantage of, again, if we can. I also think that food is very incredibly emotional, and we cannot pull those apart. And so we shouldn't have to, right? I think we hear always like emotional eating is bad. And again, it's not something I subscribe to. So some points to think about, again, which of these points resonates a little bit more. How do you see food at this point? How would you like to see food? I think that's like a really great self-reflection, almost kind of practice to be thinking about as you're, at any part of this. Okay. Okay. So for the first one of these common diet culture beliefs or myths, if you will, is this idea that we shouldn't eat anything that our grandmothers or grandparents would recognize as food. And I hear this all the time, and I see how it's like generally well-intentioned, but I also see how there are so many problems with it. And so full stop, I think the most basic, most important thing to know is that literally all food is chemicals. Good stuff is chemicals, toxic stuff is chemicals. That's okay. That's kind of how it goes. Our very basic essential nutrients, fats, carbs, vitamins, proteins, minerals, all of that is chemicals. And sometimes just like accepting that is kind of a good way to take our mind off this idea of like, oh my gosh, I am scared of toxins and chemical things we might be eating. Sometimes it just kind of like wipes those worries away. And so we always hear things like, if it's some long, complicated word, it must be bad because it must be some type of chemical type of food. Again, like this didn't exist years ago. Again, a lot of these basic food chemicals definitely did. In fact, I realize I'm not sure what eras people's grandmothers would have been growing up in here, but I'm sure for many of us, there may have been actually more food preservatives at certain times. And that's also not necessarily a bad thing, right? That allowed many generations of people to eat in a time where there wasn't much food availability. Or like my grandparents, for example, again, I can really only speak to my own, coming up in war-torn Italy and didn't have much access to things. So yeah, preserved things, really, really helpful. Also, what this whole idea misses hugely, again, thinking more on like a cultural aspect, is a lot of, again, many years ago, globalization wasn't what it was. And so foods that we now recognize are just from other cultures. A lot of our grandparents, not having been exposed to those, would definitely not recognize those things as food, right? And so that's not really true either. This whole idea is started by someone, Michael Pollan, who people in the group may have heard of, very popular food writer. And again, when we think about, okay, what's this person's background? And he's someone who's wealthy white dude from California who grows a lot of his own food and lives in like definitely in North America, but maybe in the world, I'm not sure, like the number one place for fresh produce and good food. So is that really fair to come from this person? I don't think so. So this also kind of goes into that huge diet culture idea of like eating clean and all those sorts of things, which to me, again, has so many issues, because what does clean even mean, right? Does it mean like bland and like no sauces or no flavorings? In like the cooking food world, clean means like a simple flavor where you're just getting that and there's not much of an aftertaste. So like, is that kind of what it means? It's one of those things that to me is just silly, because it can take on so many meanings, but also mean kind of nothing. So I wanted to share with you some common food chemicals that we often might eat, we often might, not eat, but basically pretty standard stuff. So the most complicated looking of all of them is something called cyanocobalamin. It's actually vitamin B12. It's actually very important. It's actually, a big one. A lot of us, if you take like a multivitamin or something, you're definitely taking it. Or if you're someone who eats like meat or most dairy, you're eating it. Speaking of dairy, we also have lactose in the center here. So lactose is the sugar that exists naturally in milk. Of course, it's chemical too. It's actually two sugars combined together. We also have gelatin, which is also, now it's super cool. As a collagen is a huge part of gelatin. And so now you can spend a lot of money for this, but you can also spend a little bit of money and buy Jello. Basically, it's just again a gelling agent, ascorbic acid. So we often will see that as a preservative, and it is because it's an acid. It's vitamin C. So if you ever, preserve something in an acid, or squeeze lemon juice on something to keep it bright and keep it like, have you ever heard of like putting apples or something in lemon juice? That's all it is, right? Because the ascorbic acid there is an antioxidant, and it's helping prevent that browning. The browning is basically oxidation reaction, okay? And also we have calcium carbonate here. This is actually Tums. As someone who suffers from heartburn, big fan of Tums. But basically it's like the supplemental version of calcium that we see often, okay? So I think it's helpful to see these things and just kind of, again, take this worry off. Yeah, I don't necessarily want to eat toxic things, of course, but this idea of like not being able to eat chemicals and looking for like chemical-free meat and things like that, it's largely marketing, and it's playing to our just general lack of knowledge. And I don't say that to say that people are uneducated or uninformed, but rather to say like not everyone had to do biochem, and so and that's fair. And so again, marketing people know that. Okay. So I also wanted to talk a bit about the idea of control and the idea of food addictions. So there actually is like 12-step addiction programs for food. In the same way that like Alcoholics Anonymous exists, they exist for food. And this is something that really, really grinds my gears, to be honest, because I have yet to see in my practice any person who felt really out of control with food. Maybe they were binging, maybe they just kind of felt this weight come over them, and they avoided that food for their life and they were happy and fine. It is very, very rarely about an actual food, but way more likely that it's about an emotion we might have that leads us there, or a memory of a food that leads us there. And so I think avoiding the food is really missing the point. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about the research here, and specifically some like addictions research as well. So my point in showing you these two stats is that if we're always thinking that, food is something that we must control, and we are all just like these crazy primitive humans who need to be counting everything and measuring everything, lest the food just take us over, and our bodies just take on all these uncontrollable weights and shapes that would, be quote unquote terrible as per that culture. But again, don't agree with that. Actually, only 24.9, barely a quarter of higher weight individuals actually do report symptoms of food addiction. So this idea of like everyone is in a larger weight because they can't control their food is like, no, there's many people clearly who are totally fine enjoying their food and exist in large bodies. As well, there's also straight-sized people, yes, less, but there is also straight-sized people who actually report symptoms of food addiction, and they are still in smaller bodies. So, what's that about? So this idea again that like being out of control is explaining larger body size or things, I think it's, again, totally missing the point. And this idea of food addiction is like, again, like in general society seen as something real, but it's not something that the DSM-5, which is like the major manual of like psychotherapy, or I'm probably getting that wrong, but I apologize. it's where they recognize all the disorders, all the treatments on how you properly diagnose them, etc. And this is not recognized there. But there is something that is referred to as non-substance related disorders, where like this kind of falls. Either way, it is not necessarily the idea of like binge eating disorder either. That's different. And as for the research, as which I'll kind of mention, it doesn't seem that food addiction in the way, again, that like alcohol addiction actually exists. Of course, feeling out of control with food and feeling like addicted, I need to have it, that exists. But the same like physiology that, again, like alcoholics or like people with drug addictions might go through does not happen in this case. And again, continuing to avoid those foods, I think can actually be really detrimental long term. So I actually want to move this. Sorry. So I wanted to show you, okay, more about, again, so there's a systematic review from 2018, so I guess 2 years ago now, that again is disproving this idea around food addictions, how it exists. And so there's this theory that because food, but mainly sugars, enhance dopamine pathways. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that's responsible for like rewards in our brain. And so we want more things. If something boosts our dopamine, we want more of that thing because we want more dopamine because that makes us feel good, right? Dopamine and serotonin are two really important neurotransmitters that basically make us feel good. And so other like addictive drugs do also enhance dopamine pathways. And so when research found that that part of your brain was lighting up after sugar, people were thinking, oh my gosh, people are addicted to sugar and that's the whole world's problem. However, research also shows that dopamine pathways are activated from a number of other things, including sunlight, including music, meditation, exercise, all those things. And I don't think, is anyone addicted to sunlight or music? Like, no, that's not exactly how that works. Other food chemicals definitely also activate this pathway, actually, especially a lot of protein-rich foods, specifically some amino acids, just because those are the building blocks of everything, including the neurotransmitters in our brain. And what I should say, neurotransmitters refer to basically like messengers that are sending messages across our brain. So this idea, again, that something that enhances dopamine must be addictive, must be therefore, again, got to control it, is totally false. They also did research, and admittedly, this isn't rats, but I'm going to quote it anyways, where they had rats on a calorie restricted diet. It was a higher fat diet, a lower sugar diet. So little starved keto rats running around. And then they gave them the option to have some sugar. And those specific rats were like very impulsive about going to get the sugar, even though their behavior of like going to get the sugar was punished by getting some sort of time out, which like I have no idea how they would have done it. I digress. So basically this idea of underfed, not given any sugar, that's when they're like running to sugar and showing these addictive behaviors. But those rats who were given a higher sugar diet really didn't show that at all. So this idea of, having ad hoc access to foods and having like full permission to eat foods, which again is something major that we work on when I'm working with clients, and like a major tenet of intuitive eating as well. In those situations, there was no food addiction to be seen. So it's interesting that, again, not human research, but still, this research around exactly how they would treat food addictions by totally reducing their intake didn't actually solve the problem, but was rather a band-aid. I'd be really curious to see how they might do this in human studies, but I guess it would be really hard to do. Okay. Okay, I'm going to skip over it. So on this note, okay, so what about having full permission to eat foods? What about this idea of intuitive eating, which is more than that one tenet, but it's part of it. On this other side of, again, not having this like strong controlled behaviors, we have research to support this too. So just as a quick quick overview, the idea of intuitive eating is very simply put, listening to your own internal intuition and own body's wisdom, as opposed to following a specific set of rules, as we're often recommended to do. So you literally get to choose what to eat, and you get to choose how much to eat, and you get to choose when, which is kind of cool. And so again, very radical as per diet culture because it's so different, but very well researched and well supported as well. Interestingly, as we talk about like sugars and things like that, there's a lot of research to support that people who deal with diabetes, who are following intuitive eating, pathways and journeys, actually have better blood sugar numbers and do not suffer from, crazy hyperglycemic events. So again, the idea that like control is what we need all the time, not well supported. Okay. So this specific research, specific study that I wanted to show you from 2017, published in the Journal of Clinical Nutrition, which is good. They were looking at actually a health at every size program. So it was all women. They were enrolled in this, 3-month HAZE program where they were learning about it and all that sort of stuff. And then half the group was in this program and the other half was just like waiting on the wait list. So no, that was your control, right? And so they actually found, so I should say most of these people were in larger bodies, 70%. And they actually found a significant increase in their ability to eat intuitively and listen to themselves after going through this program. But they also found an improvement in diet quality. Okay, so this idea that without control, what's going to happen? I'm going to eat brownies all day. I'm going to, you know what I mean? Like, what will I do without someone strictly on me? We don't really see that's true either, because we actually see these scores of, relative, again, it's of course issues in research like this here. I have to say all nutrition research got issues, right? Because in this case, they're looking at like food frequency questionnaire. So they're just asking people, how often do you eat this? How often do you eat this? That sort of thing. I would assume that when they say higher diet quality as a result, maybe people were reporting eating more fruits and vegetables. Maybe people were reporting, including plant-based proteins and stuff. It's a number of things, but I thought this was really interesting and really, really telling to this, again, idea of control. Okay. I also want to make a quick note just about, again, like controlling our food, controlling our weight, that food is just weight, is actually just as genetic as our height. And we can't really control that so much, right? And so sometimes it's really putting that into perspective is kind of helpful. Okay. So I wanted to also talk about food intolerance. I think this is like a major thing. I think it's a cool thing. And a lot of my work also is in clients with digestive health issues who are struggling from a number of, digestive woes. And they're often coming to me with this sort of, you see this image here, this like stoplight system of food. They'll come to me with this and they'll say, I did this intolerance test and these are the things I can and can't eat. And I take a lot of issue with this. I think, again, clients in this situation, you're just looking for an answer. And so I totally do not blame you for this at all. But I definitely blame people who are selling you this because it's very, very expensive. And again, it just goes more to this idea of like, oh my gosh, all these foods I can't eat. What am I going to do? So I don't think it's helpful in the long run. And so, of course, true intolerances, that's a real thing. And I'm not going to ignore you if you were to say that you had an intolerance to something. I'm not going to force you to eat something. As well as allergies, but they are definitely different, right? And they're all moderated by things we call immunoglobulins. So here listed as IgG, or you might see IgE. IgE is the immunoglobulin that's more responsible for allergies. Like that's the one they're testing if you're, looking at a peanut allergy or tree nut allergy or a milk protein allergy or things like those, or, there's major allergens. In Canada, which also include like shellfish, wheat, mustard, soy, eggs as well. There's also IgA, which is responsible for certain like autoimmune diseases like celiac, and then the IgG, which is what they're looking at in these food intolerance tests. So how these work is they're doing a blood test, and then it reveals these foods in red, that these are the foods that you were like high reactive. And interestingly, people will say, you know, all these foods on this red list, these are the foods I eat all the time. And so often that's what it's doing. So IgG doesn't necessarily mean like that immunoglobulin, when that shows up in your blood, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't eat it, but rather you have encountered it, right? So I should also backtrack quickly and just say, ooh, sorry. Oh, okay, thank you.
Hi.
Thank
Oh,
you.
I just wanted to let you know that you
I
just
saw
got. Okay, perfect.
Okay, 2 minutes from now, right?
Yes, sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna speed this up. Okay. So it just is a sign actually that like our immune system recognized it, flagged it, and said like, okay, cool, this other thing. So according to these tests, that means that like you're hypersensitive, but it's actually a marker just that you have tolerance. You've seen it and you've done it, and like your T cells, which are another immune cell, have responded. So it's actually just that physiological response to exposure to food that they're seeing. What's also interesting is that it seems that, like again, this is a natural defense, but it seems that people who have react more strongly to a lot of foods, it actually seems to be a response to damage to like the lining in your digestive tract. So it's almost like you may not necessarily be intolerant to all these foods, but rather there is something that's going on in your digestive system. There's obviously some damage here, which may have, as a result, some of those food proteins, again, probably the ones that showed up as red, are kind of leaking through the system in a way that they shouldn't be, which I guess starts a whole conversation about leaky gut, which we don't have time for today. But so it actually might just show that there's damage there. Again, something to be treated, something to be dealt with, but maybe not necessarily in the way that these tests are telling us we should be dealing with it by avoidance. Okay, so oh, sorry, I was supposed to be on this the whole time. This is also just what it looks like, the actual antibody there. So most of our antibodies are this type of immunoglobulin that they're looking for in these tests. So of course, it's kind of coming up a lot. Okay. I was going to talk a little bit about food combination diets, but I don't have time, so I'm not going to do that. I will wrap it up, and I apologize for maybe taking too long on certain things, but thank you for bearing with me. Again, I'm happy to share these. You guys can read through this if you're interested. Short cold notes. You don't need to practice food combining. You're good. Yeah. I guess I will shut her down here then. And I see a hand up. I don't know how to, you can go ahead because I don't know if I have to click something.
I don't know if it's my side. I can't see anyone who's hand up. I think that was mine from Earth. Did I not take it down?
I don't know. That's okay.
Okay, yeah,
good.
I don't think there's a hand up. But speaking of hands up, does anyone have any questions for Olivia? If you want to type in the chat or unmute, you're free to do both. Someone in the chat said, wow, there's definitely lots to learn. Yeah.
It's a lot of stuff, yeah. Kind of got overexcited with the task at hand.
It was great. It looked awesome. Oh, Marilla?
Hi, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I think like I don't really think about like the science behind it, but I feel like it's very helpful to know. So thank you.
Good.
You're so welcome. I did have one question. When you're talking about like intuitive eating, so like how I've heard like the phrase like before, but I don't know exactly what it is that well. But is it that like the fact that you have no restrictions, like you're not maybe like focusing on food so much? Because like usually if like you're told you can't have something, it's kind of like all you can think of in a sense. Maybe that's why like diets can be very hard for people and they cause like a lot of problems. So is that like what intuitive eating does? It's like because you don't have that, it kind of like sets you free in a way.
Yeah, oh, I like that idea. So I'm sharing this here now that I know how to share things. This is from the intuitive eating website. It's the principles of intuitive eating. So you're exactly what you said is definitely part of it. It's the idea of, I know it sounds simple to say like, oh, and the idea that you just do what you want, because it's really hard to go from like this controlled diet culture to just like, okay, go off. So it is, and these are major tenets of it, but not necessarily like steps you go through, but it's the idea of, oh, I see it's kind of cut off. It won't let me do through it all. Here we go. But it's this idea of like understanding that like diet culture has failed us, moving forward from that, being able to understand what our hunger looks like and honoring it by like noticing I'm hungry, I'll eat, as opposed to like I'm hungry, but it's 3 o'clock, that's the wrong time. I don't know, you know what I mean? That sort of idea. Learning to figure out where has our relationship with food gone wrong, you know, what has kind of gotten in the way of allowing us to feel peaceful in that relationship, and how can we foster that again. Trying to think about like this idea of food police, so like who, this voice in our head that tells us things are good or bad, like what the heck is that about, and who created that voice. Learning to find enjoyment and pleasure in food again, in the same way we respect hunger, respecting what our fullness is. Understanding that again, emotions are part of the whole eating experience, but learning to cope with our emotions, not always with food as well. Tenets of body respect, and then of course wanting to like honor our health too. So again, like a digestive health client who, you know, there are certain foods that might really not work for them, or certain eating patterns that might work better for them. It's not to say like, okay, there's no food rules at all. If we decide like, you know what, this is a really good type of food or something like that to include, like, of course, those things can still be part of it. It's just kind of the way it's done. And again, it's a choice that that client makes, as opposed to me saying like, you got to do this, right? So it's kind of exactly as you said, like as soon as you're not thinking, or you're told to not do something, that is when you want to do it. So it's kind of like, okay, instead of having this push and pull with something I'm quote unquote supposed to do, how can I make these like rules for myself based on what I actually like and what makes my body feel good, you know, or what gives me energy, and kind of learning what that feels like, which admittedly is a process and a challenging one, but a worthwhile one. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that really helps.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Marwa and Olivia. Does anyone have any more questions?
I saw a hand up earlier. I don't know if that person still had a question.
If you don't feel comfortable talking, you can always type in the chat too. Or if you want to give it a go, you can try.
Okay.
That's okay.
So if there aren't any more questions, I
Yeah.
suppose we could move on to Laura then.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. I know we're getting late, but I hope you guys will learn something and take something away from what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to share my screen. Just trying to up here. Sorry, I'm just trying to move it away. Okay, there we go. I figured it out. Okay, sounds good. So I was going to talk about me, but I think they covered everything really well in the intro. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about weight bias and discrimination, weight restoration, some gaps in treatment, relapse and recovery, setting boundaries, and self-compassion. So we're going to talk more about like eating disorder treatments and kind of like what comes when you're looking for help and after you've received that help. So I can just see, perfect. So when we're talking about weight bias and discrimination, I think a lot of it was talked about before, and there's some key pieces that were really great, especially when considering things like the BMI. So our body mass index is something that's very rooted within diet culture, and kind of a non-Haze and older style of thinking within the medical field. It's something that actually doesn't reflect someone's true health, and it doesn't account for fat versus muscle mass and how that plays in it. So actually really muscular people would technically be overweight compared to the body mass index. So it's not necessarily something that's rooted within science, but it's continually used. So our current systems continue to reinforce these types of systems by using indexes like this. There's also the stigma within the healthcare system and within society, and how seeing someone in a larger body, they receive different treatment from doctors, different treatments from society, and even to go through everyday life, like taking a flight, can be difficult for some people, and they don't receive support on this. So this is a way that diet culture reinforces these weight biases and treating people in larger bodies completely differently than if they were smaller. And then there's also the weaponization of health. So, you know, within our diet culture beliefs, we believe that some people believe that others are not worthy of adequate treatment, and because they maybe got themselves into this health situation in other people's perspectives. And then other times people will use disorders like diabetes as a weapon, like, oh, if you eat that, you're going to get diabetes, when a lot of people are born with this and it actually has nothing to do with their food intake. So all of the diet culture just kind of becomes a way to attack another person and say that maybe they're not worthy based on the size or their health status. And then what was talked about beautifully is the Haze, health at every size. So I won't talk about that. And then a great story that I like to talk about that really highlights a lot of this. On Instagram, you can find her at Amanda Paints. And this was a girl who came out with her story last year where she was going to a lot of doctors and she was repeatedly told to lose weight. And then finally, 6 months later, a doctor actually took her gut issues seriously, and she was diagnosed with colon cancer. So for months it progressed and it was misdiagnosed. And then now that she's a year out from that diagnosis, she actually found out that she has been diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is a rare disease that actually causes weight gain. So she's being told to lose weight for something that wasn't even her fault to begin with. And so all this blame, was being put on her for her health status, when actually or perceived health status, I should say, when in reality she had two serious illnesses. So if you guys want to learn more about that, and she's a big advocate for weight bias and discrimination and diet culture ideals within the medical industry. So yeah, Amanda Paints on Instagram. You guys can find her there and learn more about her story. So I feel like weight restoration was touched on a bit, but I just like to talk about weight restoration because it shows a little bit of how diet culture actually permeates the eating disorder recovery community and treatment. A lot of treatment can be focused on weight restoration and using that as a goalpost of recovery, when actually what research is finding that any sort of perceived benefits that weight restoration brings on diminish within 2 years. And being weight restored doesn't necessarily eliminate shape and weight concerns. It can actually highlight it, because there's still so much focus on body size within the recovery community. And with in these communities, it's been, and what you've heard before, there's very strict criteria according to the diagnostic manual of what constitutes an eating disorder diagnosis. So someone's perception of the DSM can have consequences on a diagnosis. And also, when we're looking at weight restored, we need to compare it to what recovered and remissioned means. And these are all terms that, people adopt and really define for themselves. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So we're going to talk a little bit about gaps in treatments further. So there's a lack of evidence-based practices within eating disorder and disordered eating treatments. There's a no gold standard, and treatment consistency varies quite a lot. There's also a reliance on medication like Prozac for bulimia when there's actually no evidence to show, but it's kind of a Band-Aid when practitioners don't really know what to do with people with eating disorders. Access to treatment is difficult because, disordered eating and eating disorders have been seen as an affluent white person problem for a very long time. And there's more private eating disorder facilities than publicly funded. And what we're seeing now is westernized diet culture reaches to other cultures. We're seeing very westernized types of eating disorders within people who didn't display them in this way before. So getting culturally significant access to treatment is very difficult. So if you're looking a little bit more at relapse and recovery, it's difficult to define. That some people will say that they have full recovery where they're not engaging in any symptoms, and some people say partial recovery where they engage in some symptoms. Other people like myself would say remission, and I would say that I can fall in and out of that remission. There's a high relapse rate of eating disorders, and actually a lot of people who have one eating disorder and reach some sort of partial recovery remission are very likely to develop another eating disorder, not only to relapse, but to develop a binge eating disorder or bulimia, because eating disorders and disordered eating can kind of mutate around our lives and what's happening. So whatever's a convenient way for the disordered eating to come out, it's going to take that. And then I always like to highlight the nonlinear journey of recovery. Think of it as a mountain, and you're seeing the mountain from one side. So you only see the progress when it's right here in front of you. But as you're going up the mountain, there's harder times when you don't feel like you're getting there. But stepping back and looking at the overall picture, we can see that, everybody's going to have ups and downs. And the thing about the relapse and recovery journey is that it's unique, and people should be allowed to define that for themselves. So we talked a lot about setting boundaries, but I just want to highlight them again. Saying no is hard. It's something that has to be practiced. Setting boundaries on social media can be very difficult, but an example of one that I have in place is that anyone who advertises or promotes waist trainers, diet teas, anything like that, I will unfollow them because that's kind of a social media boundary I have set for myself, regardless of how much I like that person. In person, you can set those boundaries, but like someone mentioned earlier, you can't set those boundaries with, some relatives. So I like to use the bathroom. I'll just go and sit in the bathroom for 5 to 10 minutes and pretend I'm using the bathroom if I don't feel comfortable in that conversation, or I feel like I need a couple minutes to regather myself. I will do that with diet talk. But, over time, I've made an effort to make it obvious that, certain conversations are not okay. So, that's just some ways that I've set up boundaries, and that you guys can too. And then also identifying personal triggers. Looking at one's personal triggers is a great way to protect yourself in the moment if you can identify these things beforehand. And we'll talk about some ways that you guys can do that. So now we're going to talk about my favorite thing, which is self-compassion. This is something that was popularized by Kristen Neff. So you guys can definitely find TED Talks and books and everything that she's done. So self-compassion is a really great tool to use in this area because we are taught to be so critical of our appearance and what we eat and everything surrounding diet culture. So when you're looking at self-esteem versus self-compassion, our ego is actually still attached to our self-esteem, and our self-esteem can be affected by the ego, but self-compassion is when we're actually able to release the ego altogether when looking at the situation. So we need self-esteem to reach self-compassion, but self-compassion is where you can kind of let go of that ego part to really look at the situation. Self-compassion can help you change your response to suffering. And when you change your response to suffering from, always an automatic negative response, you can actually start to affect the way your nervous system reacts to suffering. And I say suffering as very broadly as experiencing, a family member make a comment to, relapsing in your eating disorder, for example. But when we start to change our response, we can actually change the way our body reacts and kind of turn off the autonomic arousal. So having acknowledgement without blame is a really important piece to self-compassion because it's acknowledging the emotions, the hurt, but not blaming yourself, not blaming other people and places where that blame doesn't belong, just because it's more comfortable to place the blame than to deal with the emotion that's inside of you. But then it's not fighting back against that emotion. It's just acknowledging, okay, I'm really upset about this. And you can start, that's the first step to processing and working through what you didn't like and what's not working. So letting go of what's supposed to happen. A lot of disordered eating and eating disorder, people in recovery that I've spoken to over the years have talked about control and how food is something they can control in their bodies. They feel like there's something they can control, but there's a more we can't control in our lives. So self-compassion helps us to deal with this unpredictability a little bit more. So you want to recognize common humanity and flaws. So self-compassion actually allows us to see that a little bit more in others. And then we can reflect that within ourselves. It helps to reduce maladaptive body image and eating disordered behaviors. It's also related to successful intuitive eating. Intuitive eating can be very hard to adopt in the beginning. So having self-compassion with yourself during that process actually has proved positive outcomes. And then it's also associated with positive treatment outcomes. So eating disorder programs that have adopted self-compassion as a strong component of their programs have actually showed that there's more positive treatment outcomes in those treatment facilities. So just quickly, some self-compassion myths. So some people say that, self-compassion is just self-pity, but actually self-compassion is the antidote to self-pity because it increases acceptance and kindness. A lot of people will say that self-compassion is a weakness, but it's actually one of the most powerful sources of coping and resiliency. And, a lot of people will say, oh, it's for sissies, I just got to pull up my bootstraps. But after a while, you can start to see a pattern. And if for some reason, you feel like you need that self-compassion to help with coping and resilience, it's definitely a good source. And then there's complacency. So a lot of people believe that they need self-punishment and self-criticism in order to do better and be better when they mess up, or maybe when they fall a little bit behind. But, research shows we actually don't need criticism to be motivated to be or do better. But actually what they've seen in caregiver relationships is that acknowledging failure and offering a caring response and solution goes a long way versus punishment, and implementing punishment and self-punishment. A lot of people might, bring up the narcissism, but actually narcissism is rooted within the ego. And as we talked about earlier, self-compassion is when you can let go of the ego component. So they're almost, at opposite spectrums. And then there's maybe a bit of selfishness, but actually compassionate people are more likely to be selfless and caregivers. And self-compassion and caregiver roles actually helps to sustain caregivers and decrease burnout. So I think that's something that can be, that shows that it can be translated to help with everyone prevent burnout. So last but not least, we're going to do talk about a little bit of fostering self-compassion. So meditation and mindfulness is a great way to do that. If you Google and YouTube is a great resource. There's tons of guided meditation and mindfulness practices on YouTube. For a lot of people, prayer is a great way for them to foster self-compassion. It is changing your inner dialogue. So what we talked about a little bit earlier, and changing your innate responses to suffering if they're more negatively prone. Working through meditation and mindfulness, it can definitely help into changing that inner dialogue and actively making changes to change that inner dialogue. And a lot of people adopt the stance of, I'm my own best friend. So I can't say things to myself that I wouldn't say to my best friend or my little sister, my mother, my grandmother, whoever that person is for you that you would never speak to in the ways you speak to yourself. And then when you catch yourself doing that, you can verbally announce it and then make that change. Starting with empathy. So the first step to self-compassion is empathy, and working from there, and then, working through different practices to let go of your ego. And then obviously releasing your ego. There's great resources online about how to do that. And for a lot of people, it's going to therapy and gaining and more known sense of who they are as a person and what makes them tick. And then from there, they can release the ego. So it's different for everyone. Acknowledge without placing blame, again, making that an active practice. And then also looking at writing exercises and journaling. So before we finish up, I just like to share my favorite analogy that I really like with eating disorders, but I think it can be really used with a lot of things and a lot of mental illnesses. And so basically, you see the red chair. For your entire life, you've seen this chair as red. But as you're going through life, you're seeing that this chair isn't actually red, and everyone around you sees this chair as green. And then you start to realize that your life depends on seeing this chair as green, but you don't know that you'll ever see it as green. So basically what it is, with body dysmorphia and so many of them, our view becomes so rigid that we can't see anything else. And we actually almost start to gaslight ourselves. And so what we have to do is trust those around us almost, and everything, and the information and the science and stuff like this. And then you can trust that the chair is green and that treatment is good and that there's more on the other side, rather than having the eating disorder, the disordered eating, or the body dysmorphia continually seeing that red chair. Sometimes we have to let go of that control and just trust those around us. And sooner or later, the chair kind of morphs into a brown. And then for some people it goes brown. And then for some people, they can see it all the way green. And that's great, but that's kind of that recovery process and how it's on a spectrum of red to green. And some people only get to the middle. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was really amazing. I see that we have someone with their hand up. Dia, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So, hi, Laura. Could you briefly go over what compassion means? Like,
So self-compassion means, I'm sure there's a definition. I think it's kind of something that you can adopt for yourself, but it's basically accepting and being kind to yourself and to others, and looking at things from a perspective. And where I really like it, the releasing the ego, the part is really stepping back and looking at everything, without the emotion for a moment. And that's why I really like the mindfulness attachment and meditation to self-compassion, because that's a great avenue to start stepping back and looking at your life that way. So I would define it as just, moving through life with a kindness and an understanding for others, and then through others we can put it on ourselves, because it's easier to give compassion and empathy for others. So what I tell a lot of people is to look at ways that you believe that you're currently empathetic and compassionate in your life, and who are those people, and what do those moments mean to you, and then start to reflect on ways, okay, well, I do that, but how do I react to myself in that way?
that makes a lot more sense. Thank you so much.
But
Nice.
you can Google Kristen Neff. She is like the pioneer of, I will type her name, and she has hours of material on it.
And also, I wanted to say that the tips that you gave, for example, like saying positive things to yourself as you would say to your best friend or someone you actually like, someone like your family member, I think that is something that would really help a lot of us, because personally, me, sometimes it's like I go negative to myself. So I think hearing this, that be nice to yourself as you would be to others, it would be really, like, it's really helpful.
Mhm. Yeah, and especially as women, because we're naturally, taught to be carers and communicators and connectors. And a lot of times it's so easy to put that onto others without realizing, we don't treat ourselves in the same way. So yeah, I find that's a good way to, start to shift that thinking and to reflect. And I tell people, an easy reflection, and if you keep it in your head, it's easy to let it pass by. But if you can say it out loud, or really identify it or journal it, then you can kind of like materialize it more, rather than it being a fleeting thought.
Thank you so much, Laura and Dia. Kidis, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Laura. I really liked the part of your presentation when you were talking about how, I guess, the use of measuring the amount of weight someone has gained as as a sign to indicate their progress with their eating disorder. I guess this is focused on eating disorders where people are aiming to lose weight. Um, I like that you pointed out how it may not be the best method in order of tracking that progress, and it may not be the most sustainable. So I guess my question is, what are some other markers of progress that we can encourage, or we can um, help people who are on this journey identify?
So I personally think that it's hard to define, because I believe that is a very personal journey, and I believe everyone needs to identify that for themselves. But I think especially Natalie's presentation really highlighted some of these. But just taking numbers and measurements and all of this out, and going based on what you feel, and how engaging in that behavior makes you feel, and what you think you can do instead. But I think that's something that everybody kind of has to define for themselves. I don't know if Natalie or Olivia had any more tangible suggestions.
Yeah, I think you're right. Only you can know what you're experiencing emotionally and psychologically. Like if you look at an eating disorder, it is a psychological disorder. So while you can be weight restored, you might still have obsessive thoughts about food or a lot of emotional distress around eating behaviors. So I think, often a gauge of that is a reduction in distress and feelings of freedom and acceptance. But yeah, the timeline changes for everyone and the severity and degree. And sometimes, recovery is also like this, it's not linear. So it's important to keep that in mind too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Something like, I think it's about 70% of people with eating disorders do end up relapsing. I don't know, I'm not very, yes. Olivia.
Sorry, I wanted to, I was having trouble unmuting myself, so sorry about that.
That's okay.
But I think you guys spoke to it really well, that idea of like, it is definitely not linear. And someone, a psychologist who I did a lot of work with, explained it as like snakes and ladders. So it's not like you're always up and down, you're never necessarily at square one. But I do think that focusing on any one piece of it is kind of missing the point, right? Like if we focus only on, okay, I gained the weight back and now I'm at a quote unquote healthy normal weight, then you might be missing all the psychological stuff. And it's like, okay, well, I don't, thinking only symptoms, I don't binge eat, let's say, anymore. I don't restrict anymore. Again, what about that level of distress or those sorts of things? So we kind of need all of it. The weight restoration, of course, is important because literally if our brain isn't well nourished, there's the very important emotional and psychological work that needs to happen kind of can't, just because your brain doesn't have the fuel to literally go there. So it's not all of it, but it's important. And so I think that idea of defining what would you like your relationship with food or your life to look like, how do you imagine recovery to look like, I think is important. I think it's one of the first questions we often go through in work as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say that, I talk about all these things because when I went through my first eating disorder recovery, it was very based around these diet culture standardized goals. And, it took me a very, very long time, longer than it should have, when I relapsed, to realize that I had actually relapsed because I was in a higher body weight. I did not look like I did the first time. And that was something that I try to get people out of, is like, we got to step away from these standardized, because it harms us later. And a lot of people don't recognize a relapse because they're focused on all these goals, but our eating disorder, disordered eating will morph and grow as we grow.
Yeah, I love the idea of knowing like what your red flags are. Something we work on a lot is, okay, how do you know what relapsing looks like again for you? And that doesn't necessarily mean like your eating disorder is back full force, but it might mean like you're just kind of engaging with it and giving it strength again. And how will you know when that happens? I think when you're looking at a recovery plan, answering that question is a big one, so that you can identify it quickly, because it's gonna happen. And I hate to say that, but it's your idea of like, it's remission. It's not like full recovery forever, where it never comes into your head, right? It's something we kind of do need to just be watching out for.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys so much for all your insightful answers. Before we just continue on with the Kahoot, I just really want to thank all our presenters and everyone who joined and asked questions. It was really amazing and like great to hear from so many different experiences and perspectives. Jacqueline is going to link a feedback form in the chat. So if you want to fill that out, you can enter for a chance to win a prize. And we're also going to do a Kahoot, which you can also win a prize. So I will share my screen in a second. It's a little technologically challenged. There we go. I'll share my sound because why not? All right. So this is the game pin. There's also the QR code if you want to scan and join. I'm just gonna wait until a few people join. I know we're a little over time, so if you need to leave or anything, please feel free to do so. We'll be sure to email the feedback form as well. But if you're able to stay and join, please do. No worries, no problem. Okay, no worries. I'm gonna give folks a minute to just grab their phone so that they can join. Okay. I was like, that Laura Jane Arsenal. Is there usually sounds here? No? Okay. Oh. Thank you so much, Natalie, for joining us. I know we're over time, so don't worry. Thank you so much, and we'll be in contact a little bit later. Bye. All right, I'm gonna get started. I think my fuse just blew, so that's why my room is dark. Yeah, I had my heater and my laptop plugged in. I think it would blow too much in one plug. Okay, is everyone ready? Ready to go? Perfect.
How come I'm not up there? Oh.
Are you?
Got it.
You got it?
It kicked me out, but I'm getting back in.
Okay. There you go.
There.
Right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Which one was mentioned as a gap in eating disorder treatment? Too many providers, a family involvement, evidence-based practices, or A and B? Oh. Oh. Okay.
Yeah, the A and B thing doesn't really translate well in Kahoot, apparently.
Pardon?
Like doing question A and B as an answer doesn't really work
Yeah,
well in
that's
Kahoot.
true.
Yeah, it's okay.
I said A and B when I was creating and I was so confused.
Yeah.
Okay, my
Yeah.
bad, guys. Maybe I'll specify for the rest of them. An up and down, what does a nonlinear recovery journey look like? An up and down process, having struggles or relapsing. It's unique to each person and it's always moving forward. So which one? Great job. All right, we have Alexandra in the lead. Which one was not discussed as benefit of self-compassion? Acknowledgement without blame, recognize common and humanity flaws, reduces maladaptive body image and eating behaviors, and putting oneself above all else. That was really quick. Good job, guys. LJA in the lead now. Diet culture reinforces the idea that food needs to be manipulated, used to make us behave good or bad, used to change your body shape or size, or all of the above. Great job. Ooh, Julis just took the lead. Got some competition there, LJA. Intuitive eating has been shown to cause out of control eating and addictive eating behaviors, improve diet quality scores, be a successful weight loss diet. Oh, there we go.
Oh,
Alexandra's coming back up. Food combining is helpful because.
okay. Apologize because we didn't get here.
Oh,
Can I just give everyone the answer?
yes,
It's
go
the
ahead.
green one. It's the green one. Me talking too much for that.
No, that's okay. It was really great information. All right, good job, everyone. Julius has a high streak of 5. The following is an example of diet culture. Crash diets such as keto, carb-free, sugar-free, Atkins, intermittent fasting, viewing food as good or bad, having to keep your food intake within strict. Okay. Awesome. All right, 2 more questions. Diet culture can impact body image because okay, so A and B, give me a second. Sure for trace thin bodies to be worthy and acceptable. I think it's blue and green. Blue and green. Sorry, blue and red. Yeah, okay, there you go. Good job. Blue and red. Sorry guys, I didn't realize the A and B translated weird here. This is the last question. The following statement is true. Disordered eating is similar to smoking. Diets can have the same impact as smoking, and not everyone who diets develops an illness, but it doesn't mean it's healthy. Awesome. Okay, so our winners are, in 3rd place we have Julis. In 2nd place we have A, and in 1st place, Alexandra. Congratulations. Great job, everyone. We got runner-up NPK and Olivia. I'm gonna stop sharing, but if these winners would like to send us your email, you can either private message me or Jacqueline, or you can email us if you don't feel comfortable typing here, but it might be easier just to private message us your emails for your prize.
Do you want our school emails or our personal emails?
Whichever one, it'll be an e-gift card. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing screen, but Alexandra, A, and Jules. Thank you, everyone, so much for attending. I hope you guys enjoyed and have a great evening. Just make sure you send us your email if you're one of the winners. Oh.
Someone asked, could you also share the slides? So just talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that. Perfect.
Yeah, I'll send all the slides to all the participants that signed up. So
perfect. Yes, I got your message, Alexandra. Thank you. Yes, I do. If you signed up with our event to get the link, then we have your email for the slides, so don't worry about that. Thank you so much. Make sure to follow Cafe U of T's Instagram. Olivia and Laura, if you guys want to drop your websites or Instagrams, anything that you want to share. And we're also at WMHT Yorkview on Instagram.
There you go. If anyone has questions or things like that, always happy to chat. And this should be on my slides as well.
Perfect.
Awesome. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone. I think I might just end the, all right, I think you have that. Yeah, do you want to just end it?
Yeah, no worries. All right. Have a great night, everyone. Bye.
Bye.